everybody, Wildman here, and we are going to talk through episode 9 in my zoo study here, zoo design study, I guess I should say. And, sad to say, this is the last scheduled or at least planned episode in this series. So hopefully you've enjoyed what I've put out and shared with you over these 9 episodes, and hopefully it helps give you some insight as to what goes into zoo design as zoos change over the years. Before we get into any real specifics in this episode, I just kind of want to throw out a few facts and trivia tidbits about the zoo. This particular zoo has only been closed 3 times in its history. In September of 2008, after a weekend rainstorm which caused some damage and flooding. February of 2011 after a major blizzard, and in April for a couple days in 2013, again from severe flooding from a thunderstorm. Another interesting fact is that the sale of marshmallows in the zoo, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but years ago in the zoo you used to be able to buy food to throw to the animals, and marshmallows specifically for the bears was a very popular item, and the zoo decided that obviously wasn't a good practice for the health of the animals, so that was discontinued in the zoo, believe it or not, all the way back in 1969. And I know we've talked a little about the big fountain centerpiece of the zoo. That was actually installed in 1954. It's called the Roosevelt Fountain. It honors previous President Theodore Roosevelt because of his conservation efforts that he has always done. We also covered the wolves a few episodes ago, and in 1957, that's where they kind of carved out and fenced in what they call Wolf Woods, and that was done initially for the staff to undertake groundbreaking studies on wolf behavior. And not sure if everybody knows what a moldorama is. They're fairly popular, I believe, around the world. But Brookfield Zoo is very famous for having moldoramas all around the zoo in different areas. And the first one was installed in 1966. So let's touch a little bit about the architecture of the park and the buildings in the park. Most of them are this Greek or Roman. I think this is really, Greek type architecture. And most of the original buildings in the park have some sort of style or building structure in this style. And what you're seeing here is the original entrance to the zoo. And, that entrance, for the most part, is unchanged, except where you used to walk through the archways. That's all closed off now, and you actually approach through like standard or typical more modern ticket turnstiles to actually get into the zoo nowadays. And part of that is the parking. The main parking's out across the local road, and you have to go through this underground tunnel to get to the main entrance of the zoo now, where you actually take care of the ticketing. Let's take a few minutes to talk about the Hamill Family Play Zoo. We'll take a look at the map of the zoo here to show you where it's at. But I guess the history of this building is this used to be called the Small Mammal House, and this is where those type of animals were on display. But over the years, a lot of these animals have been kind of incorporated into some of the other exhibits, like the Fragile Desert, or even the Bird or Reptile House, and Habitat Africa, things like that. So this building hadn't been used for a number of years, and now it's this Hamill Family Children's Building, and it basically is an exhibit that has some lemurs, and it's still semi-focused, I guess, around some small mammals, but it's more of a museum type environment. That's the best way I could describe what it's like inside. And it's definitely for the younger guests, So if you don't have a younger guest, you probably would never really go into this building because there is an upcharge to go into it. One of the other things they do, I think they also do a lot of arts and crafts and things like that in this building. Moving down into the southeast corner of the zoo, this is historically where the Children's Zoo has been located. The original Children's Zoo opened up back in 1953, and it was more like a farm, like a petting zoo farm type area, but it also had a number of small animal enclosures for kind of like more local animals. Like I remember there being groundhogs and porcupines and things like that in the Children's Zoo. But one of the other things I also remember is there were some concrete creeks that kind of meandered around through one part of it with some like stepping stones that you could go across. And as a kid, I always would ever have this vivid memory of jumping around on those stepping stones. But I also have a kind of funny personal story from the zoo. There's a barn. There's like a farm section of the Children's Zoo. And there was a barn, and they used to have a monkey that lived in the barn. And, it might have been a spider monkey. I don't remember what breed it was, but it was kind of up in the hayloft. And in the opening of the barn, there was a rope that would be hanging down, and the monkey would climb up and down that rope. And I remember as a little kid, one of my earliest memories that I could recall is being there, watching this monkey come flying down the rope and landing on my head. And as my parents tell me the story, I got bit by the monkey. I don't remember being bit, but supposedly this monkey attacked me. And the second part of the story is years later as a teen, we were traveling and we were in Colorado at an amusement park called Santa's Village. And there was an organ grinder with a monkey at that park. And we were watching him do a little show or whatever he was doing, and we were going to give him some money in his cup. And the monkey jumped on me and bit me. And I remember that time, it bit me because I was a teen. And I remember it. The guy had the show. It had rabies shots and the whole deal. But it's just kind of funny to me that, not many people that don't work around animals, for their livelihood. I've been bitten by a monkey twice in my life. So anyway, you may have noticed on the satellite view when I zoomed into this area that it was under construction. That's because the Children's Zoo was closed down, and it reopened back in 2015 as an area called Wild Encounters. Now, it still was kind of like a children's zoo, and there was pandas and reindeer petting zoo, and it also has one of the largest free-flight parakeet aviaries in that new section of the park as well. Now, personally, I haven't been there since that upgrade has happened because I haven't lived in the Chicago area, and I really can't find a lot of good pictures online from this area. So there's not much to show, so I just kind of wanted to mention that that's one of the changes that did happen. Let's talk a little bit about amusement rides in the park, in the zoo. So back in the 60s, they had a small railroad that went around the circumference of the zoo, and it was dismantled just, I think, because of age and maintenance reasons, back in the mid-'80s. But the pathways are still there that the train had used, and, they're used as access or service roads around some back areas of the zoo. And actually, one of the stations has been converted into a snack stand towards the north gate area of the zoo. We'll talk a little bit more about a future plan for adding a train back into the zoo when we get to the future design plan a little bit later in this episode. There's also a beautiful carousel in the zoo that was added a couple decades ago now. I can't remember exactly when, and I actually couldn't find when that was built, but it's one of the more beautiful carousels I've ever seen. The animals on it are all, wild animals you would see in a zoo. It's not a typical horse carousel, but when you see it, as you can see in these pictures, the carvings or the molded animals that are on this ride are very, very beautiful. Just want to mention the Roosevelt Fountain again and show you a couple pictures of that with all the flower gardens that are around the fountain. This really takes up a large footprint of the zoo, but has always kind of been the centerpiece kind of icon of the zoo in more recent years since it was built. And quite honestly, I don't think they'll ever get rid of it, but like I said, the fountain and the gardens around it really do take up a lot of space and a lot of acreage, but it is very beautiful to walk around those on a nice summer day. And then there's Indian Lake. I think a lot of people also call this Swan Lake. It's basically a pond back in the far west edge of the zoo property with some heavily naturally wooded areas around the lake. There is a little nature trail that goes around the lake for you if you want a quiet walk. Not many animals to view except for swans and local waterfowl. But it is a nice place to take a little walk through the woods. Again, future plan for this, I think it's going to be the same, but this is an area of the zoo property that can be expanded upon if ever needed. Before we get into the final look at the future plans or potential future plans for the zoo, I did find this old picture and just wanted to kind of walk through it because I find it very interesting. This is a very early picture of the zoo, aerial picture, and you could see how small a lot of the vegetation is and how empty it is around some of the buildings and zoo structures. So I just kind of want to map this out. This is obviously where Roosevelt Fountain was added. You could see it was just a lawn area originally, and you see all these little oak trees all along these pathways. These oak trees are pretty much saplings in this picture, and now they're close to almost 100-year-old oak trees. And when you walk down these paths now, you are totally under a huge giant umbrella of oak, giant oak trees. It's beautiful. This is the pachyderm house over here. You could see that again with no trees or very small young trees. Way out here, kind of in the middle of nowhere, is the lion house and lion enclosures. Over here was the bear grotto. Again, just some kind of freestanding looking exhibits at the time. This was the primate house, which is now the swamp. This is the small animal house, which is the Hamill Family Play Zoo. This whole looks like, and with this construction area, this looks like when they were just building the Baboon Island. This was the original reptile house, and this was the original reflecting pond, the original bird house, and our aquatic birds, and this was the original bird house, which is now the reptile house. And in this area here that's all open, there are now some shops and restaurants and zoo administration buildings in that area. One of the other things, that's quite different is, right in this area here is where the new Seven Seas Panorama building is. And in this area, it's mostly parking for annual passers and VIPs. But there are another few administration buildings and guest service type buildings that have been built in this area as well. So, as you could see, the zoo did change a lot from when it was first built. Oh, one other thing I didn't mention is right here in this big rectangle is where Tropic World resides now as well. So, it's just kind of to finish my other comment, it kind of shows you, how the zoo evolves and changes over the years. So, taking one last look at the future plot or future plan of the zoo, I kind of want to just talk about some of the general things. First of all, we had mentioned this before, but you see this dotted line that goes like this, kind of an up flying V form around the zoo. That is a proposed sky ride or chairlift ride, which I've mentioned a few times, but if they were ever to put that in, it's quite interesting because it goes over the big cat enclosure here, it goes over the elephant enclosure here, and it currently would go over the bison exhibit here as well. So depending on the actual layout of that, it could be a very interesting ride. The other thing is that there is a proposed train. So if you look at this dotted line, it kind of loops around the children's zoo, comes back, goes around the wolf and bears, and then it, interestingly enough, cuts through the Habitat Africa area. But it would be really nice if they were to add some kind of small train ride back into the zoo. Not sure how they would get it to fit and coordinate through all this elephant environment. But, if I do a recreate of the zoo, I will add a train. I just may pull it out back around the edge here instead of cutting through, depending on, the capability of how flexible the game is to let me build something like that. The other thing I want to point out is the carousel is still there, and there's a few things like it's got special exhibits here in the upper floor of the Skyway building. There's a butterfly structure here. There actually is a butterfly garden in the zoo currently. It is like right in this area, but it looks like in the future plan they'd have more of a dedicated permanent structure to house that. There's a discovery center, a new restaurant which doesn't exist right now, another restaurant over here in the Australian area, and other than that, one of the other things I wanted to point out is that this is festival area and amphitheater space. It looks like a stage, so this almost appears to be some sort of raised seating where maybe bands would play. And this seating area is actually built up back up against what used to be the old Bear Grotto. Now where the Bear Grotto is, it just says future exhibit, so they thinking of maybe putting something else back there. And where the baboons were, they're kind of keeping that open as a future exhibit with no specific plans as well. But other than that, I think we've pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover in this little series. So